the next speaker is another iconic from the iconic institution of Apollo Hospital, that is Mr. Arvind Sivaramakrishnan. So Arvind ji is there, is the CIO of the Apollo Hospital, and yesterday we heard from Sangeeta Reddy the kind of the work that that institution has done, and especially with the help of technology and digitization. And Arvind is the main force behind whatever Apollo has been able to achieve to reach out to nooks and corners of this country and into the various fields. So we want to be today wiser from Arvind, mainly from the point of view, not about, we know what you have been able to achieve there. But the issue is this, that something that you can tell us, how can the institutions learn from your experience, and how, especially I would say, we consider clinicians to be a stumbling block, roadblock in kind of adopting EMR. How did you overcome all that? So over to you, Mr. Arvind Sivaramakrishnan.
Thank you, Dr. Agarwal. Very kind of you and very gracious of you. I'll quickly share my screen, and while I will be using a presentation, I would probably start deviating from the presentation in terms of what you would like to cover. So, just requesting that I will be, the slides are more indication. So you're absolutely right in terms of, the difficulties that it takes. And I think Dr. Sudhir also nicely alluded to all of these in terms of how, we can manage all of these effectively. There are these challenges that are financial. There are these challenges in terms of change management. And I think to start with, I'll take you through how we looked at it. So when you're looking at it as an organization, and you're looking at change and culture in an organization, it really needs to start with the fundamental culture, which is I named my slides making digital our DNA. What does your organization want, and what do you stand for, and what do you attribute yourself to stand for? Now, that's really what forms the fundamental driver of how you deal with change, how you deal with participation, how you deal with the necessary aspects of resistance that is perceived far and wide. And Dr. Agarwal did make the comment on doctors being difficult, and I really want to address part of that in terms of this. So it starts with the vision. It starts with the vital elements of what it is. So really, I put this slide not as a Apollo Hospital advertisement, so don't get me wrong for that, but in terms of an example use case as to how do you drive that in terms of bringing in technology, bringing in the use of it to drive effectiveness, to drive sustainability, and to drive desired outcomes. So that's really part of it, still imbibing that whole aspect of human empathy that fundamentally goes with healthcare. Now, when you look at the strategy of digital transformation, and this is where understanding the background of what we are doing and how we're driving this part of it, is the promise of healthcare now in today's world and the expectation of tomorrow's world is going in terms of personalized care. And when we look at personalized care, it is the combination of information utility and augmented intelligence that starts driving data harmonization and insight creation, and clinical decision and actionable insights that brings clinical and operational outcomes. So this really answers the question to every person in terms of what's in it for me? Why should I participate? You necessarily will start having this issue of when you're going into large scale digitalization, and EMR is kind of, if I may say, the elephant in the room of digital. There will be comments that this is something administrative. You're just increasing the record keeping activity. And those are comments that we do hear. And how do we counter those comments is actually by looking at this promise of personalized care. Because when we talk to the clinical participants, when we talk to the ancillary participants, when we talk to the administration that runs the healthcare system, giving them that aspect of insight creation and excellence, clinical and operational, that's really what you stand for. So when you start with that as your base platform, the conversation now starts becoming, how do we make it? And when we start talking of how do we make it, the very first aspect of why we saw resistance, and I must admit that within Apollo, we've had two versions of the electronic medical record, the hospital information systems and all of that. And the biggest learning for us is at some point in time, we definitely feel that everybody wants it, everybody gets it. But then we still see resistance. Why do we see resistance? Because we need to make this as simple for them as possible and as much into their natural workflow. When you start incorporating digital into the natural workflow, that is when you start getting the benefits that these users will adopt it as part of their daily routine. And it is not seen as an additional burden, and it is actually seen as something enabling what they come to do at their best. And this is where you bring in all the digital technologies. Vijay and Dr. Sudhir nicely showed structured text, the natural language processing, converting text to discrete field. That's doctors find that very, very effective when you start parsing. So they have the power of subjective, but still getting the benefit of objective at point of care. At point of care is very important because in India, there's a crowd, there is a volume, and that volume needs to be serviced effectively. You don't have the benefit of post facto analysis. That's a very limited potential that happens, almost close to none. And then you start looking at that integrating with operational processes, whether it is integrated with billing or integrated with discharge process, wherein patient wait time and service aspects, all that contributes to effective utilization. And please don't see it as a single entity. You are seeing this as a cohort of a care team. The care team is doctors, nurses, and administrative team, all working together to service this patient. And each person knows what's going on. The left hand knows what is going on in the right hand. And that exceptional coordination and harmony of operations, one, smoothens delivery aspect. Second, brings in a sense of discipline and calm into a very difficult care process, which many a times could be emotionally charged. So that's really how you look at integrating all of that. And one very, very big lesson that we had learned is how to have the user experience and the user screen design to be intuitive. Intuitive, not intelligent. See, this is not the place where you demonstrate the pride of your engineering capabilities. This is the place where it should be intuitive, because the person dealing with it has already got a problem in their mind. And when that happens, the screen has to give them that user interface and user experience that enables them to do the right thing. And this is the place where quality guidelines, when they are put in quantums of alerts and reminders. And remember, alert and reminder I'm being careful about, because people can get into an alert fatigue. You can start putting red exclamation marks and arrows and yield symbols everywhere, and people will get tired about it. And after some time, they'll stop looking at it, and thereby you will miss what is logically important. So putting that in a structured manner, in an intuitive manner, that is part of your natural workflow, that's really what benefited all of us. And that means that you integrate that to patient pathways and value for the clinical activity as an integrated value creation. And this is the place where we look at evidence-based care practices and augmented intelligence being part of it. Now addressing what Dr. Agarwal said, doctors could be difficult. You know what? Doctors are not difficult. Doctors are difficult because we, using digital technologies, are trying to interfere with their well-regimented, governed care process. And because they are responsible for the human life in their care, they don't want disruption. But when you're adding value to the process by enabling them, they embrace the change. So it is us about the digital technologies actually aligning with the workflows, with the processes, so that the doctor's work is enabled and not seen as a burden. So this is not about record keeping. This is about effective enablement of carrying out that transaction. That transaction could be billing. That transaction could be ordering supplies. That transaction could be structured notes for the purpose of documentation and care coordination, or it could be hardcore diagnosis and multi-team discussion on the patient condition. It has to be effective, and that's when doctors, the entire clinical fraternity and the administrative fraternity actually see change as a welcome activity, see change as something that is helping them, as opposed to seeing change that burdens an already burdened health system because of volume, because of shortages that are prevalent in this industry. This is the place where digital is a friend and digital starts becoming an enabler. And this, when we have this as an organizational conversation, this organizational conversation is what helps manage that change. An activity like this is not run as an organizational activity. It is run with the operations. It is run with the clinical fraternity. It is run with HR, because you need to have the human resources start working out people and their responsibilities. And it starts working out with IT. This is not run as a technology initiative, but this is run as a core cultural initiative. And when we look at that in terms of a single health record, where they are able to see the longitudinal aspect and the episodical aspect with all information dealing with all areas by which they could look at diagnosis and differential diagnosis, that is where you see adoption happening. And here, when we look at that also in terms of clinical care, continuing the, see, it's not just about the hospital episode when you look at an EMR. It's also about care continuum. What happens after I discharge? How are we following up? What's going on after that, so that the outcomes of the treatment at the hospitalization is actually materializing, and thereby you are able to track to a complete state of wellness of the desired condition and a potential reversal. So that aspect of imbibing technology with care continuum gives the whole healthcare delivery system that reason and need to embrace it in a constructive manner, bringing people, process, and technology all put together. And that, when we start giving back clinical information as analysis, like what Dr. Sudhir was mentioning in some of the graphs that he was showing, when we start showing them that this has contributed to a reduction in either the HbA1c or the diastolic and systolic blood pressure when you deal with certain conditions, certain evidence-based care practices being pushed by the digital, accepted by the process, practiced by the people, then you look at it in terms of a wholesome organization change that actually becomes genuinely a movement, the DNA of the organization, and thereby digital is not seen as an animal of change management, but actually a welcome friend that enables effective care. That, my friends, is the experience that we've had at Apollo Hospitals. Thank you very much for a patient hearing.
Thank you, Arvind, for yet another brilliant talk. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that doctors are not difficult. It is the system which we are presenting to them. So if you align what they are seeing and if you kind of share with them the reason as to why some changes are being brought, things are not that difficult, and it's not difficult to really enforce all this.